Welcome in, Hokies fans, to this edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We record on Monday, February 28th. This is episode 227 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, and we had to get on set and talk about the miracle finish in Miami on Saturday with Darius Maddox hitting a shot to keep the Hokies' NCAA tournament hopes alive. We'll also look ahead at the final week of the regular season for the men's hoops team and look ahead at the ACC women's basketball tournament starting in Greensboro on Wednesday. All of that and much more coming up on episode 227 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, which starts right now. We welcome you into episode 227 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, however you are listening, whether that's on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, or Stitcher, or if you are on our YouTube channel. If you are, we ask you to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you know when the Tech Sideline Podcast goes live every week. If you're in the live stream on the YouTube, be sure to leave a comment or question for Will and Chris. We'll get to those with David at the end of the show. As always, the Tech Sideline Podcast brought to you by the Southeast Regional Training Center. They're creating Olympic opportunities and helping grow the Hokies wrestling program as well. ACC championships this weekend in Charlottesville. Hokies hoping to take home the crown. You can donate and learn more at southeastrtc.com today. We have a great crew on set today for this special podcast after the Miami win. Will Stewart, founder and general manager, back across the way. Chris Coleman, lead analyst and columnist of Tech Sideline, to my right as always. David Cunningham, our managing editor in the fourth chair. Malcolm Stewart does a great job behind the scenes, best podcast producer in the land. And I'm your host, Jake Lyman. Let's hop right into it, guys. What a game on Saturday. I was talking to Chris that we had to do a podcast today just in case Tech loses to Louisville tomorrow because then the shot doesn't mean quite as much. But let's look back at that Miami game. Hokies, according to ESPN, had a 3% chance to win the game with 90 seconds left, down by 8 points. They were down by 4 points with 23 seconds left, somehow found a way to win. Darius Maddox with the steal and the three to win it. I mean, biggest shot of the season so far, obviously. Maybe the biggest shot of the Mike Young era to this point. Gets the Hokies an opportunity to possibly still get into the NCAA tournament.
So many moments in that minute and a half stretch where your emotions just went up and down. Like, Pedulla makes the three, then gets the steal, dishes to Aluma for a dunk, and you're like, oh my God, we're back in it. And then we immediately give up a Hail Mary for a layup. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You just gave it right back to him.
That steal and that dunk, that was nasty.
That was awesome.
And he had just taken it. He had just taken it in and scored, gotten the and one, and bounced the free throw way high up in the air.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, that's the way it was.
That was great stuff.
Yeah, and even like the Maddox shot, like when he was taking it, like I'm always confident that a Darius Maddox shot is going to go in, but I'm sitting there like, oh no, you're leaving him with way too much time. No.
Right.
Darius Maddox got the ball in his hands and said, I'm shooting it. Like,
yeah.
It didn't matter that he could hold for the last shot. He let it go, made it, and thankfully this time the Miami buzzer beater did not go in. Would have been tough to lose 2 games to Miami, both on buzzer beaters.
Especially when like Tech's defense was really strong on that possession.
Yeah.
Like Miami had to go to their, I don't know,
second or third option.
Second or third option, I would say. I certainly wouldn't say that he would be their second option, from probably their third or fourth option, to be honest with you. But
yeah, typically in a situation like that, I was sitting there waiting for the Miami possession to start, thinking they're going to score. They got so many guys that can go to the basket. If you're Miami, you don't want that last shot to be a three-pointer by.
It was odd that the whole possession was just them right there at the top of the key, and then he couldn't get a shot off, and just
passed
it to the other guy at the top of the key. And that was not a good possession. They were coming out of a timeout, but I mean, Tech locked them down. Tech's defense was excellent yet again. 70 points seems like a normal average defensive game, but how many points did Miami score in transition off turnovers?
25 points off turnovers.
And how many of those were like easy layups? Oh, quite a bit. It wasn't just that Tech was like throwing the ball out of bounds under the basket. I mean, those were live ball turnovers.
These are what they call live ball turnovers.
And Miami was getting runouts.
That was a clinic in live ball turnovers.
It really was.
Yeah. So my experience watching the game, and you know this if you follow me on Twitter or you've been seeing me posting on the board, I couldn't actually watch the game. Yes, I could have gotten one of those Reddit streams or something like that, but they run 3 or 4 hours behind.
There was a bunch of people in PKs on Saturday, just simply because. Oh yeah, I mean, except for the one bar golf group, everybody that was in PKs on Saturday was there to watch the game, and it was on every single TV. It was a great atmosphere.
Yeah, so I asked I put a Twitter poll on my feed that said, "Are you able to watch the game, or is it blacked out for you?" Got over 1,000 votes in the poll, and 46% could watch the game. Wow. Close to 50% it was blacked out. Then there's of course the 4 or 5% that answers other or don't know.
Don't know.
You know, whatever
I don't know whether I can watch the game
or other. So I didn't actually get to watch it live. So my experience was I went back and I watched the condensed version last night, which is about 11 minutes long. And when the ACC network, digital network, puts together the condensed version of the game, basically what they do is they show you all the made shots. You don't really get a feel, and I get it. I understand that. So the reason I bring all that up is you were talking about, holding Miami to 70 points. Not only did they get a lot of live ball turnovers, but some of the shots they made, that's a really good offensive team.
Mm-hmm. It is, and that's why I think that last possession may have been so surprising that it was Wardenberg taking the shot when you've got Isaiah Wong, Cameron McGusty, Charlie Moore, who we've all seen hit those shots at times and just didn't go the way Miami maybe planned it out to.
The fear there, I was just thinking Wong the whole time.
Me too.
I was thinking more, somebody.
And it seems like both of the home teams in this series this season probably should have won their game. Mm-hmm. But I think both teams maybe would take it because you get a quad one win out of it instead.
Do you remember the first Big East game that Virginia Tech won was against Miami?
Against Miami.
And do you remember how improbable it was because Virginia Tech turned the ball over 30 times in that game? They literally had 30 turnovers and won the game.
And they still, Tech won by like 15 points. It wasn't
somehow they turned the ball over 30 times and blew Miami out. Well, they didn't blow Miami out this time. This is a much better Miami team than it was back then. Yeah. But 20 turnovers on the road and you win. That's not going to happen very often. So this is actually, it's going to go down as like, we'll see whether Tech makes the NCAA tournament or not. But as far as an individual game, this is like a once-a-decade game.
It's funny you bring that up. Can I launch into the story now?
Go ahead.
Because Chris and I were both thinking about the same thing. So I wanted to hit up Damian Salas and get him to do some statistical magic and asked him, when was the last time Tech was down 8 or 10 points that close to the end of a game? But I didn't need help to remember one. So I remember this. Malcolm was a month old. It was February of 1999, and Tech beat Fordham 79-75 in overtime. Virginia Tech trailed with a minute to go in that game, trailed by 10 points at Fordham and came back and won it. And the details of that game were that, first of all, it was A-10 basketball, and it was Fordham and just blah. It was Tech's last year in the A-10. And I wonder if anybody in the YouTube chat recalls this game. But Fordham had a good player, a guy named Bevan Robin, and he had the flu. He'd been sick all week. He was playing for Fordham, but he wasn't 100%. And so, Tech's winning by 10 at halftime. And then some guy, Jason Harris? Some guy by the last name of Harris for Fordham.
He's the first ever random dude to ever go off on Virginia Tech.
So the pattern of random dudes going off against Virginia Tech? Well, it was this guy, Jason Harris. Yeah, finally found it. So Jason Harris makes 6 3-pointers. He just goes off. And Fordham outscores Tech in the first 19 minutes of the second half, 43-23. So Tech is down 10 with a minute to go. And then Harris gets cramps and has to go out of the game, and they can't rub him out. So then they got to give the ball to Bevan Robin, he's had the flu all week. He proceeds to turn it over a couple times. He's a 90% free throw shooter. He misses 3 free throws in the last minute. And Tech comes storming back. They make some 3-pointers and stuff, and they tie the ball game with 2 minutes left to go and win it in overtime. So Chris remembers that game, and I remember sitting in my living room and I stayed with it. I watched it. I couldn't believe what I'd seen. It was very cool.
It was one of those random games that was actually on TV.
Yeah.
Because most Tech games were not on TV back then. It was on some random regional network, and your satellite feed went out with what? How much time left?
It was Tech had a timeout and was supposed to take a final shot down 3, and my satellite feed went out. So now back then we all had component stereo systems in our living room, so I ran over and turned on the radio and got to listen to Bill Roth call the game-tying shot.
And you say once in a decade, that's 20 years ago.
20.
It doesn't happen very often.
There's got to be another one in there somewhere.
So it's funny because here's a line from my recap of the game. I start off by saying, don't ever turn the TV off. And I said, I'm glad I didn't, because I saw a comeback the likes of which you see maybe once every 5 years. No, it is. No. To Chris's point, it's like every 10 years or so.
Yeah, it's funny because somebody texted me after the game on Saturday and was like, what in the world happened? What was that? And I was like, that's a once every 5 year game. And then I got to thinking about it, and I'm like, no, that's more like a once every decade game, but maybe it's a once every 20-year game.
Yeah, I don't know. It would be interesting to kind of drill down into that.
Well, whatever it is, it's important because it came in such a big game for Virginia Tech. Yeah. You lose that game, you think at best you have to get to the ACC championship to get into the tournament. You win that game, now it seems like if you can win these last 2, maybe win twice in the tournament, you're going to have an opportunity at the bubble. That game came at the most opportune moment for Virginia Tech to get a game like that.
So if Tech makes the tournament, that will be a game that Virginia Tech fans will always remember.
The biggest thing about this game, you can talk about seeding for the ACC tournament, NCAA tournament, et cetera. The biggest thing is there's no longer a 0 in the quad win column.
Yeah.
That's the thing. When the selection committee looks, they won't see a 0.
They won't see a 0. It also, barring something crazy happening, Virginia Tech's going to be a 7 seed in the ACC
tournament, right?
Which means they will probably play Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's the best matchup for Virginia Tech in the ACC tournament out of all the top seeds. And that would be that would represent another quadrant 1 win for Virginia Tech if they get past their opening game against either Louisville or Clemson or whoever it ends up being. Yeah. And then they would play Notre Dame in that quarterfinal game. And that's a better matchup for Virginia Tech than Duke and North Carolina and even Wake.
The way the bracket looks right now, that entire side is better matchups for Tech. I think Duke's on the other side. Who else scares me? It's on the North Carolina is on the other side. I believe
North Carolina's moved up to the 3 now because Tech beat Miami. So
right.
So right now it would be Duke and Miami on one side, and then Notre Dame and North Carolina on the other.
So it's so. If we want to get into this now, VT Hokie 2000 asked a question on the board and said, what teams does VT match up well against in the conference tournament? What teams does VT not match up well? Basically, Virginia Tech's going to win a couple games in the ACC tournament or make a run. What's the best case and worst case scenario? And I would start by saying the best case might be Notre Dame, and the worst case is probably Duke.
Yeah. Well, I think Duke is worst case for everybody. Yeah. They're far and away the best team.
They're way ahead of everybody else right now. Yeah. Tech also matches up well with UVA. I still so Tech's got to play Louisville Tuesday night.
Yes.
If they have to play them again in the ACC tournament
within a week,
back to back,
don't get me wrong, Louisville's not a good basketball team, but I watched them play Wake Forest. I watched a good portion of that game, and Louisville is long and athletic, and they're kind of mailing it in on defense, and they just don't look super motivated. But, the matchup, they're still a team that can play really well. And if Virginia Tech has to play them twice in the course of the regular season, the ACC tournament, I really don't like those odds.
I would say matching up, Tech wants to match up against a team that is very similar, where it's not athletes. When you're not playing against a North Carolina team that North Carolina might not be the best basketball team, but North Carolina has athletes.
Yeah.
Miami is a good basketball team, but
they also have athletes.
And they also have athletes, but Virginia Tech matches up very well for the most part against Miami. I think it's a combination of finding that groove. Notre Dame is a pretty good basketball team. Not many athletes. So
UVA.
Same right. Yeah. So there are teams in there. I think if you're Virginia Tech, so here's the thing. If Virginia Tech wins one game, it can't go lower than a 7 seed.
Yes.
Right.
So or if Syracuse loses tonight.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, I mean, If Syracuse loses tonight, then Tech can't be lower than a 7.
A 7, yeah. Because Tech has the tiebreaker over Syracuse anyway.
Right. I would say at this point, it's the chances of being the 7 seed in the ACC tournament are probably like 75 or 80%.
Yeah. It might even be 95. The only way Tech gets to the 6 seed is if Tech wins both their games and UVA loses to Louisville on Saturday.
Yeah.
Right. And Louisville just doesn't seem like the type to
now, here's what I will say.
But neither did Florida State.
If Tech is going to get the 7 seed, you better hope that that Duke doesn't drop below Notre Dame, because Duke plays North Carolina.
Right.
And if Duke loses twice and Notre Dame wins, Notre Dame, I don't want to say it's a cakewalk compared to Duke, but Duke Carolina is obviously more difficult for Notre Dame than I can't remember who exactly Notre Dame has on top of their head. But there's a scenario where if Notre Dame wins out and Duke loses 2 games, which is probably unlikely considering Duke's only lost twice this season in the ACC.
Right.
But there's a chance that Duke could fall below to the 2 line, which it could get dangerous.
They'd wind up in Tech's side of the bracket.
They would.
Tech would have to play
Tech's
him
in
the second game.
Yeah,
in the quarterfinals.
But I think if everything holds, if you're gonna bet on it probability wise, it's likely that it'll be for Virginia Tech as 7 and Notre Dame as that 2. And I think, in all honesty, I mean, it's funny because when I talked to Mike Bray at the ACC tournament or ACC tip-off in Charlotte back in October, I asked him about Virginia Tech, and he was like, "Man, nobody else in the ACC gave us as much fits like over the last 2 years as Virginia Tech."
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Tech just matches up well against Notre Dame. I mean, if you remember, Tech last year blew Notre Dame out of the building here, and then this year, Tech was 0-4 coming in and picked up its first ACC win against Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So people don't really talk about that win over Notre Dame. Everybody talks about when Tech was 10-10 and 2-7. But what about when they were 0-4? And Notre Dame came in here, and Tech beat them. Atkinson got in foul trouble, and that helped
Tech actually
lot.
had to come back and win that game.
Yes,
that was like that game was the opposite of all the other early games, where Tech was leading and then lost.
Right,
but that game was actually the other way around.
And that's and you look at where Notre Dame ended up. Watching Notre Dame that night, I thought, and now they're up in the top 4. That's a huge win that people don't talk a lot about.
If that game happens in a 2 versus 7 matchup, that's like much better than like you would think a 2-7 matchup would be.
Yeah.
And the reason is because Virginia Tech is way better in terms of quality than a number 7 seed.
Yeah.
I mean, Virginia Tech should be. What is Tech's record? 10-8.
Tech should be 12-6.
This team should be 13-5 or 12-6 or something like that.
And right now, and that would put Tech in 3-4
right, which is where I think they are. I think they're one of the best 3 or 4 teams, 3, 4, 5 teams in the ACC.
And the computer rankings would tell you that
they just didn't play like it early in the season. Yeah. So, but there's a reason they've won 8 out of 9 or 9 out of 10.
Yeah, and Tech has won
8 out of 9 because they're 10.
8 out of 9, and Tech has beaten Notre Dame 3 straight times.
Right,
and the margin. So under Mike Young, their Tech is 3-1 against Notre Dame. The first game was Tech lost the first meeting under Mike Young against Notre Dame.
Probably Mike Young's first year, right?
Yeah, and it was at Notre Dame. And then Tech last year played Notre Dame twice in January, beat them by 14 in Blacksburg and 11 in South Bend.
Wow.
And then this year, obviously, beat them by 6. So this is a favorable matchup. And Mike Bray's a good coach, but this is a matchup that Virginia Tech has been able to exploit. So, I mean, yeah, I would lead to a semifinal matchup with North Carolina if you can win.
Possibly.
But that's also, we think back here, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and Virginia Tech almost beat North Carolina here. If it didn't make 5 threes in a game, you probably win the game.
Just make some shots.
So so I think if it stays right like it is right now, it's a very favorable draw for Virginia Tech.
And still a lot of balls in the air about who Tech would face in that first game, because I want to say 10 through 15 is kind of a muddled mess in the ACC
There is a
right
four-way tie for 10th right now.
So it a lot to go on there, and then obviously 10 and 15 still have to play a game on Tuesday in the ACC tournament to figure out who the 7 seed would face. Yeah. But Virginia Tech, again, I would say right in pencil, they're going to be the 7 seed in Brooklyn, barring something unforeseen in the last week.
Right now, the 10 and 15, 10 would be Louisville, and 15 would be Georgia Tech.
Yeah, and again, I don't really like the idea of Tech having to play Louisville again. Hope I'm wrong.
Well, we're going to get into Louisville again tomorrow night, Tuesday night in Castle Coliseum. But let's talk a little bit more about Miami. We mentioned Sean Pedulla a little bit. I want to give him some props. Darius Maddox is going to get all the flowers for hitting the final shot. But Sean Pedulla had 7 points in the final 90 seconds to keep the Hokies in it.
And a steal and an assist.
Yes.
Right. And he was playing good defense on that last possession.
I mean, it was the Sean Pedulla show for the last minute and a half.
It was, except for Darius Maddox hitting the shot, which obviously is the moment you remember. But Sean Pedulla is really the reason the Hokies were even in that game to get that final shot. It seems like we're seeing the emergence of the next big Hokies star over the next few years.
Definitely agree with that. He's a good athlete. He can shoot. He's got court savviness. He's just needed time to learn the system and adjust to college basketball and things like that. He's going to be a great 3-year starter for Tech. Like, people will be buying Sean Pedulla jerseys if they sell them.
Yeah. 2 of 8 from 3-point range, if I remember correctly.
2 of 9.
2 of 9.
That's
Two
the
of
thing.
9.
It's like you look at the box score and he only went 2 of 9, but then you look over there and scored 17. It's like, how did Sean Pedulla score 17 points but only made 2 3-pointers? And that's why he's really good, is because he's good around the basket and he can make pull-up jumpers and things like that. He can adjust his body in midair.
And he attacks the rim.
Right. So he's going to be a very dynamic scorer for Tech. He can score mid-range, close to the basket, from the outside.
Somebody on the board, MJF Hokie, asked actually about Maddox and Pedulla, so I figured this was a good time to bring it up.
Yeah.
He said, do you think Maddox and Pedulla getting significant minutes while coming off the bench is Coach Mike Young wanting to keep Storm, etc., happy, or is it similar to Buzz with Leday and Seth Allen coming off the bench so everyone could see how the opponent is playing early in the game?
I just think Mike Young picked his starting lineup at the beginning of the season based on, at the time, who his top 5 players were, and he's just the type. He's not going to change that. And how did the minutes break down on Saturday?
So I wrote this down. Even Maddox and Pedulla combined for 43 minutes. Aline and Storm Murphy 41. So more minutes for Maddox and Pedulla. 18 minutes for Storm Murphy.
Right, and I've noticed this. Like if Pedulla or Maddox start playing well early, he will play them more in a game.
Yeah,
like we've seen that. I was told, I remember a conversation I had with somebody who works in the athletics department right before the season started. And we were talking about the roster and everything. And I said something like, Maddox is going to have to play a lot more than he did last year. And the guy said, yeah, he is, but he's not quite ready yet. And that was an accurate statement at the time. Tech is a better team now because guys like Darius Maddox has improved. Darius Maddox has always been able to shoot. But his off-the-ball movement on both ends of the court has gotten so much better over the course of the season. Like the bigger issue with Tech earlier in the season was not Storm Murphy or whatever, like people wanted to talk about. It was Virginia Tech's lack of depth.
It was that there was a huge drop-off.
The 3 guys coming off the bench for Virginia Tech. I mean, Tech has an 8-man rotation. So you got Pedulla, you got Gassan, you got Maddox. All 3 of those guys are much better basketball players right now than they were in November and December. And that's the big difference for Tech. And and they're playing better team defense, which part of that comes back to now you're able to play Darius Maddox for 20 minutes because he's a more reliable defender than he was at the beginning of the season. He's always been able to shoot. But at the beginning of the season, he might give up as many points as he scored, and that's not the case now.
And that's the counterpoint to that is John Ogiako, who has not developed that way on defense. And you go back to that Boston College game when Aluma got in foul trouble and went out, that's when James Karnick started going off, was against Ojiako, and it carried over, and so
he's only played in like one game since then. Maybe.
Yeah, and I think, when Ojiako catches the ball in the post, I think he's on offense. I think he's fine.
He's much improved.
It's the rest of the game that's not coming along for him, and that's why he's not playing more. But
so Tech doesn't. They only have a 3-man rotation in the front court. If you watch if Mike Young's rotations, like he'll bring Gasson in. He'll take out Aluma, and Gasson will play the 5, and then he'll bring Aluma back in for Mutts, and then Gasson will play the 4.
Yeah.
So he's playing both of those positions, or at least I guess he plays the 4. It doesn't matter. It's a 3-man rotation, and they don't really have a true backup center as far as one that actually gets into games.
They've got guys with center size that they're not playing.
They're not ready.
Yeah.
I was going to say the rotation right now is essentially. If you look at the box score for Miami, for example, Hunter Couture, Keve Aluma, and Justin Mutts played anywhere from 37 to 35 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Then Pedulla, Aline, Murphy, and Maddox played anywhere from 18 to 23 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then Gasson played 8.
Right.
So and that's when Mutts and Aluma are not in foul trouble.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a little bit more foul trouble, Gasson obviously plays more.
Gasson might have played more. He got whacked in the head, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
That
God.
too,
He
yeah.
went face first right into the court, didn't he?
He did come back, though.
Yeah.
So it seemed like he was okay, but yeah.
But was he
didn't-
all there?
It didn't look great. It is Overreaction Monday after a weekend of basketball. And I want to ask you guys a question. Is it overreacting to say that it's time for Sean Pedulla and Darius Maddox to supersede Naheem Aline and Storm Murphy?
I think you don't mess with the chemistry you've got going. You've won 8 out of 9,
Yeah.
and I hate to say this, but you really should have beaten UNC too.
Right.
Make some 3-pointers, and you do.
Yeah. They're playing too well right now. Just keep doing exactly what you've been doing for the last 9 games.
It is what it is, man. Keep going with it.
If Pedulla and Maddox, when you bring them in off the bench and they get a hot hand and they start to play well, then by all means give them more minutes in that particular game. Don't screw with things right now when you're winning.
And we talked about the turnovers, 18 turnovers for the Hokies on Saturday, 6 of which came from Justin Mutts. We love Justin Mutts when he's able to make those flashy passes, but is it time for maybe Mike Young to say, hey, let's reel it back in a little bit? The turnover numbers have started to inflate a little over the last few weeks.
Some of them weren't even passes per se. Like, there was one time where it was where Wardenberg picked his pocket.
Yeah, he was just standing there. And
that's the thing. It's like you can't be stationary like that in basketball. He was just standing there waiting to pass it, and Wardenberg just came from 5 or 10 feet away and just picked his pocket. It's a really good play by. If one of our players did that, we'd be like, "Oh, great, awesome. Heads up defensive play," which it was.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think you just let Mutts be Mutts. I mean, the guy's a 5th-year senior.
The guy also
you don't want to change his
the
game.
guy also had a triple double. I mean, I think there are just some games where he I don't want to say he gets stressed out, but where he tries to do too much.
There was one pass I remember on Saturday where Justin Mutts is standing probably middle of the lane, and I want to say it was David Gasson was on the baseline, and Justin Mutts just throws it over his head, thinking he would be there, and threw it out of bounds.
But then you get the gems.
Exactly. Well, the thing is, like, he's a 5th-year senior. How much can you really change his game right now at this point? I think you just got to keep letting him be himself.
Yeah, nothing's going to change at this point in the season. I mean, this is this team. They have 2 more regular season games. We hope a fair number of postseason games, but what are we now? We're 28 games into it. 29. It's not going to change, folks.
If Tech keeps playing defense like they've been playing. Well, remember, it was just a few weeks ago they were 110th in the country in defensive efficiency, and when I checked last night, they were 70th.
Yeah.
They have moved up 40 spots in defensive efficiency over the last few weeks.
67 now.
67
Nice.
now. So you're talking about everybody's talking about their downward shooting slump. But nobody's talking about their improvement in defensive efficiency. Why is the ACC network not showing that stat? I mean, I think that's what they ought to be showing, because it doesn't make it. If you look at your average fan is probably thinking, wow, if their shooting dropped off that much, how are they winning? And nobody's talking about it.
Defense, man.
Yeah, it's defense. So if they keep playing good defense, they're going to keep winning, because they will not shoot this way forever from the outside. I mean, it's too good a shooting team.
I would like to highly recommend these series on the ACC network. I love to criticize the ACC network because they deserve it. But the series on the ACC tournament is phenomenal. Watch it. And the one that captured my attention in particular, because I lived in Charlottesville as a kid at the time, is when UVA won the 1976 tournament with Wally Walker, and I think Mark Ivoroni was on that team. UVA was 4-8 in the ACC, and they got hot, and they beat the number 17 team in the country, the number 8 team in the country, and I think the number 3 or 4 team in the country.
How many teams were in the ACC back then?
They were at 7.
Right, and they were all good. So when you say UVA went 4-8,
it doesn't mean they were a bad basketball team.
Exactly.
And they got hot. And then they didn't talk about the next year when UVA made the final again the next year and lost to UNC. But the point I'm making is, I mean, just and then, of course, there's the NC State story in 1983. Just it can happen. With the way Virginia Tech's playing defense, if the shots start to fall again, they can make a run.
And we're going to talk about what the Hokies need to do to get into the NCAA tournament, and a lot of that obviously hinging on what happens in Brooklyn next week. But let's take a break first. First, I want to check with David. Anything good in the fourth chair?
I'm looking. I've been asking, of course, some questions about off the message boards. Will posted on the message boards, and there have been a couple people chiming in. Will, I know you'll agree with this. Somebody in the YouTube chat said regional blackouts should be illegal.
Well, and my issue is that I'm a Dish Network subscriber. They dropped Masson, MASN, and so not only can I not see the RSN games on Dish, but all of the streaming services won't show it to me.
Yeah. Right. Because technically it is available in this area if you have like Comcast.
Yes,
it's available,
but it's almost impossible to get Masson.
Right, I've got YouTube TV and I don't get it. I've never understood like blackout rules and things like that. I mean, I know like whenever the Braves play the Nats, I can't watch the game on my MLB TV package, so I can't get the Braves announcers. Like it's blacked out in the area. I have to listen to FP Santangelo, which I don't have to do anymore because
he's gone. Yes, can agree with that. FP Santangelo, not fun to listen to.
So a couple of things. I've actually got the live stream up here, so I'm actually looking at it. A couple things. Eric Fisher says Virginia Tech is up 9.5 to 2.5 in the Commonwealth Clash. And I assume more separation was created by Tech's men's and women's track and field championships this weekend, which was awesome.
I think that was a total of 2 points earned for Virginia Tech.
Wow.
And stat time with Scott Glessner. Virginia Tech has not allowed a team to score over 80 points this season. Wake Forest had 80. The last time a team didn't score over 80 versus Virginia Tech in a season was, drumroll, 1948-49.
Wow. That's
So root for them to keep that going and just be really mad if Louisville gets over 80 points.
Don't even put that thought in my head.
Speaking of Louisville, Pylons on the board asked, which illogical "they're due" narrative do you support? Virginia Tech is due to beat Louisville for the first time since 1990, or Louisville is due to end its 9-game ACC road losing streak?
See, you're worried about playing Louisville twice. I'm not, because I think we're due to beat them about 12 times in a row.
So I was thinking about this last night as I went to bed. So the last time Tech won was 1990. I was 25 years old. I'm 57 now. I have lived way more than half my life without a victory over Louisville.
I was 7.
I want to say
y'all weren't. Nobody.
I want to say my parents were engaged at that point, but not married.
Only 40% of the people in this room were actually alive the last time Virginia Tech beat Louisville in basketball.
I was about 8 or 9 years away.
32 years of suffering.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about Louisville on the other side of the break. We'll also talk Clemson and a little bit about the bubble. What do the Hokies need to do to finally get themselves into maybe the last 4 in or the last 4 buys instead of where they sit now, which is on the next 4 out? We'll also talk about the ACC women's basketball tournament. Virginia Tech, a 5 seed, probably needs a few wins if they want to host NCAA tournament games in a few weeks as well. Stay with us. We'll take a break here on episode 227 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We'll be right back. Welcome back to episode 227 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, brought to you by the Southeast Regional Training Center. We spent the first half of the podcast talking about Virginia Tech's big win against Miami on Saturday that helps keep their NCAA tournament hopes alive. We'll talk a little bit more men's hoops and also talk women's hoops here in the second half. We got Will, Chris, David, Malcolm, and I'm Jake on set today. It's time to talk about the bubble a little bit, and thankfully, I've been waiting all morning for Joe Lunardi's newest update to his bracket.
Did it finally come out?
It finally came out, so we know, according to Joe Lunardi, where we stand. Virginia Tech currently is the top team in the next four out, so it would be the fifth team out of the tournament right now, according to Joe Lunardi. Loyola Chicago, the last team in, and then the first four out, BYU, San Diego State, SMU, and Oregon. So those are the teams Tech has to pass.
That is your list to root against. Read it again.
Loyola Chicago, BYU, San Diego State, SMU, and Oregon. So Loyola, I believe they're in the Missouri Valley, and their tournament starts this week. So they're done with regular season play. So you got to root against them in the tournament. BYU as well. They have that wacky West Coast Conference tournament with, Gonzaga and St. Mary's getting triple byes. San Diego State, SMU, and Oregon. San Diego State plays tonight at Wyoming. So if you're looking for somebody to root against tonight, root against the Aztecs.
Yeah, and also root against San Francisco, who's one of the last four byes.
Yeah, I was going to say.
North Carolina, one of the last four byes. Wake Forest, one of the last four byes. Michigan. Michigan, they've got an insane computer record and things like that, and they play in the toughest conference. So, but they don't have a very good record. Last four in, Memphis, Indiana, Rutgers, Loyola, Chicago. You can root against Memphis, Indiana, Rutgers. Tech didn't beat Memphis, so it's not going to hurt Tech if Memphis loses.
I was going to say,
them knocked off the ball.
Essentially, just root against every team ahead of Tech.
Florida, St. Bonaventure, Dayton. Every team on this, VCU.
Essentially.
Virginia.
And again, for anybody saying, well, North Carolina plays Syracuse, Tech can clinch the 7 seed, it doesn't matter. Tech will clinch the 7 seed with one win. So root against North Carolina.
Now, what
tonight.
I would
That
say
shouldn't be
is
hard.
North Carolina might be the one team Tech might want to root for, and hear me out. Tech could end up playing North Carolina in the semifinal. And
Correct.
if you play North Carolina and North Carolina is a top 50 team in the net, it's another quadrant 1 opportunity.
But if UNC loses, they could fall to the 4 seed, and maybe if Tech gets to the semifinals, they're playing Miami instead of North Carolina. A lot going on here. But
Would you rather play? I mean, I don't know. I guess would you rather play Miami, or would you rather have another third shot at North Carolina? I mean, you get a third shot at either team, but Miami wouldn't be a quadrant.
I don't believe they would.
North Carolina.
No,
would.
they'd have to. I want to say Miami.
Miami's like 60, around 60.
They were 57th before Tech beat them, but they could conceivably creep into the top 50. Now they'd have to blow out some teams because it has so much to do with efficiency rather than an actual.
So that's the thing. Do you want another win, or do you want a quadrant 1 win?
So let me jump in here and make a point that went through my head in the first half of the podcast. So Tech went to Miami 40th in the net and won a road game, a Q1 game, and dropped to 41st. So people who are used to watching the RPI react to that. They're like, how can they get a Q1 win and drop? It's because of the lack of efficiency, the 19 or 20 turnovers. It wasn't an efficient game for Tech offensively.
Well, Tech actually themselves, they stayed the same in offensive efficiency, and they moved up in defensive efficiency. It's just the other teams right around them in the net actually did a little bit better.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's all it is.
So there's more to it than just winning on the road.
Don't worry about the net ranking.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the
net
Palm
ranking's
ranking.
not a problem.
Don't worry about the BPI. I mean, if Virginia Tech doesn't make the NCAA tournament, it's not going to be because of their computer rankings. Their computer rankings are fine.
It'll be a lack of quadrant 1 wins.
Right. If they don't make, I want Tech is top 30 in the BPI. If Virginia Tech doesn't make the NCAA tournament, I think they might end up being the highest ranked BPI team to not make the NCAA tournament. So it's just a matter of
Not having enough wins.
not winning enough games. Yeah. It has nothing to do with their efficiency ratings. Their computer ratings are fine. Don't worry about the net at all. Just look at what other teams on the bubble do as far as whether they win or lose, and number of quadrant 1 wins. That's what's going to determine it. Whether Virginia Tech is 41st or 40th in the net is completely irrelevant at this point.
So maybe Saturday, this is the hopeful part of me, maybe Saturday and playing like that down the stretch was the beginning of reversing some of those early season results where they, again, you say all the efficiency metrics are all fine. They just weren't winning basketball games. Maybe now they'll start winning some games that, didn't go their way earlier.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about winning games. Everybody always wants to ask, how many wins do the Hokies need to get into the tournament? And that's kind of a vague question because you don't know what other teams are going to do around you. I want to ask the question, how many wins do you think Tech needs for fans to sit down on their couch on Selection Sunday and feel like the Hokies have a shot?
Definitely in. 4.
Feel like they have a shot.
Right. Oh, feel like they have a shot? 2. Feel like they have a shot. But
total.
It's so determined. It's so dependent on what other teams do. Other bubble teams.
I would have to. So they're currently at 18 wins.
To feel like we have a shot.
I would say. I would say you have to get to 21.
21. That's my number.
I was going to set the over/under at 3.5. So you think 2 wins against Louisville and Clemson and a win in the tournament, Tech feels they have a shot on Selection Sunday.
Yes, because Tech will have won. 2
wins would take us to 20, which doesn't matter in and of itself. But you
Tech
end up
will have won 11 of 12.
Right. And how much of that how much of your end of the season run? It used to be like you'd tune in on Selection Sunday, and that was one of the key stats. You had your RPI, your strength of schedule, your last 10 games. I don't know how much the committee takes that into account these days, but if they do, then that's strongly in Virginia Tech's favor.
So if the Hokies, let's say, beat Louisville, beat Clemson, and we'll say beat Pittsburgh in their first game of the ACC tournament,
I think they're in.
I think Tech's in, and I think if Tech wins against Notre Dame, like assuming they play Notre Dame, if Tech wins that next game, I think Tech's solidly in.
So then,
if they won,
if Tech wins 4
next
in a
4,
row,
they're a lock.
Tech is a lock.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So 2 wins in the final week and 2 in the tournament, you guys think in, no questions asked, especially if one of those wins is over Notre Dame.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
if they just win 3, then we're having Seth Greenberg flashbacks. Mayor of the bubble.
Certifiably insane?
No, he was. I remember there was an article about him that called him the mayor of the bubble.
But okay, so let's talk about that, and that's why Tech fans are so paranoid about the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee. Is those 4 years in a row when Virginia Tech didn't make it, and there's all these conspiracy theories about just being against Virginia Tech, or maybe it was against Greenberg. Or who was it? The Ron Wellman. The Wake Forest AD was the chair of the selection committee, right? The fact of the matter is, there is a conspiracy theory that Ron Wellman fought behind the scenes to keep Virginia Tech out of the NCAA tournament. Why would he do that? That costs Wake Forest money.
Yep.
So that's one of those conspiracy theories that just does not add up. Now, it could be possible that, based on some of his comments, that subconsciously in the back of your mind, maybe you don't view Virginia Tech in such a favorable light because Seth Greenberg coaches them. Contrast Seth Greenberg's comments to, if you remember the first year Tech made the tournament under Buzz, towards the end of the season, media members asked Buzz what it would mean to make the NCAA tournament, and he gave an answer like, we would consider it an honor, and we're just trying to play one game at a time, but if the committee deems us worthy, we'd be very, very grateful. That's a big contrast to you're certifiably insane if you don't put us in the NCAA tournament, right? So I don't think there was ever a conspiracy theory or anything like that. There was no. The bottom line is Virginia Tech, we knew before every one of those seasons, all we had to do was schedule a Division II team, and that takes our strength of schedule and RPI up at least 10 spots every year. I've run those numbers. I've written articles about that because there were tools online where you could do that.
So many
and we
articles,
just refused to do it.
Yeah, so many articles you were tired about writing.
Right. And the ironic thing is when we did make the tournament in 2006, 2007, Tech only won 21 games that year. Yeah. They went 21-11, yet they were a 5 seed because their strength of schedule was so high. Because they played a Division II team that year. And then it's like Greenberg forgot that lesson.
So everybody likes to seize on the Seth Greenberg certifiably insane comment. The NCAA Selection Committee had been screwing Tech long before Seth Greenberg ever said that. And they will screw Tech long after Seth Greenberg said that, long after he is gone and working for ESPN.
I don't know. See, I don't buy any of that. Trying to screw Virginia Tech.
I wrote an article one time.
There are 360 Division I teams in basketball. And you're telling me out of all those 360 teams, they just decide we've got it out for Virginia Tech?
I'm not saying they don't have other teams they like to screw.
And you're talking like selection committees from the 80s. You're talking a selection committee from the 90s and multiple selection committees in the 2000s. You're only talking about 30 or 40 different people over 3 different decades.
It's a real thing, man. It is a real thing. I wrote an article one time in one of those Seth Greenberg years, probably, let's take 4 years, probably 3 or 4 years into it, where, what I wrote in the article isn't going to come across well, me trying to recall it here on the podcast. But it was basically, here are the reasons why the NCAA committee said they let this team in, because they played well in their last 10. Well, so did Virginia Tech. Well, we left this team out because they did such and such. Well, Virginia Tech did the opposite, and you still didn't let them in. So whatever rationale they gave for putting other teams in or leaving them out, they did the opposite with Virginia Tech. The conspiracy theory is real, man, until I find out. Like this year, if Lenardi's like, oh, Tech's last 4 out, and Tech winds up being a 10 seed, then I will stop talking about this. If in the final weeks it looks like they're on the bubble or not going to make it, and then they're like a great seed, I'm not going to say it anymore.
Here's the thing. Nobody cares except us. It's not like bubble teams don't win the national title.
Well, that's true of every team. So, nobody cares except
that's
those
what I'm saying.
teams.
Like when all those years Tech was on the bubble, those 4 years in a row, can you name me any other bubble team from those years?
No, but I can name Georgia winning the SEC.
Right. So the whole point here is like, it's something everybody talks about every year for a day.
Well, last year, UCLA, I believe, would have qualified as a bubble team. They were an 11 seed, and they went to the Final Four and were a half-court buzzer beater away from going to the national championship.
It can happen.
Game.
It just doesn't happen.
And you know what's
often.
interesting? The ACC team that was in this exact, very similar spot was Syracuse. When Syracuse was an 11 seed. And Syracuse is the only team to ever start 0-4 or 2-7, whatever it is, and finish 500. Nobody's ever finished above 500 with that poor of a start.
Right.
And Syracuse was an 11 seed and went to the Final Four.
That was 2018?
Syracuse has had a nasty habit, and I say nasty because I don't like them, nasty habit recently of not playing particularly good basketball for most of the season and then winning like 6 out of 7 games. And
winning a few in the tournament.
Exactly. Yeah, they don't. And I've always kind of chalked that up to they get to the tournament and doesn't really explain their late season streak against ACC teams, but when they get to the NCAA tournament, they start playing teams that aren't used to playing against.
Never seen the zone. Yeah. And so to continue the conspiracy theory line of talk, what happens to Syracuse every time they're on the bubble? Tell me, everybody, what happens? They get in.
And North Carolina currently sitting on the bubble.
Every
you can
time
almost
North Carolina's
assume
on the
they're
bubble,
going to
what
get in.
happens? They get in.
I used to write articles saying exactly the same thing he's saying. I don't know. As I've gotten older, I'm way less emotional about things, and I highly doubt there's some sort of. In fact, I know there's not some. You're talking about 3 different decades and like a lot of those people that gave Tech 8 seeds in the 80s. I mean, they're dead now, right? They're certainly not on the selection committee anymore. It's not there.
But they're on their deathbeds and they pull other. Listen, I'm about to die.
I don't know. Listen, if Virginia,
I have one last thing to say. When Virginia Tech is on the bubble, don't.
You know what's even crazier is that Syracuse team to end the regular season lost 4 or 5 games, and they lost their first game in the ACC tournament, and still got in. They got in with a 19-13 record.
And how many? What year was that?
That was a 2016.
Okay, so how many? That was still the RPI.
And they
so how many? But how many top 50 wins did they have?
They beat. They had per KenPom. It looks like they had about 7. They beat number 26 UConn, number 18 Texas A&M, number 17 Duke, number 36 Notre Dame, number 51 Georgia Tech, number 48 Florida State. Right. So they had a lot of quality wins.
That's why they made it.
Going to be interesting to see 2 weeks from today when we sit on this podcast set who's right, because we'll have a bracket.
If Virginia Tech doesn't make the NCAA tournament, it's not going to be because they get upset by Louisville tomorrow or whatever, which I don't think is going to happen, by the way. If they don't make the NCAA tournament, it's because they couldn't beat Xavier's backups.
Yep.
Which is our fault. Like, we have to accept responsibility for not being able to beat Xavier's backups, right? I mean, that's all on us. We have to accept responsibility for losing to a Memphis team that, quite frankly, is poorly coached, in my opinion. I'm a firm believer in you can't blame other people unless you take care of everything that you can control. And Virginia Tech has not done that.
And this is something I wrote about last week, where I said if Virginia Tech doesn't lose, which are now anywhere between, they're both quadrant 3 losses, to NC State at home and Boston College on the road.
Right.
Both quadrant 3 losses. And the NC State game, NC State continues to lose. NC State, I don't think it'll be a quadrant 4, but it's close. You don't lose those 2 games, you're sitting at 12-6 in the ACC, and you're in the tie for 3rd, 4th, 5th.
It's a shame Tech got COVID, because I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have lost to NC State if that hadn't been their first game after a 10-day layoff or something like that.
Just look at Virginia Tech's schedule right around that time period.
They were starting to play better basketball against Duke and St. Bonnie.
You like to talk about the Xavier loss. The Boston College loss is the one that galls me.
Right.
That's the one that really shouldn't have happened. But the mic drop moment for me, where I stopped believing all this stuff, is that Virginia Tech's perceived as the wrong side of the bubble, and the committee lets them in and then says something like, "Sure, they only had one quadrant 1 win, but they've won 11 of their last 12." You know, and if they make a statement like that, I'll be like, okay, I'm.
Well, the thing is,
complaining.
generally speaking, they don't make any statements.
They'll usually have somebody on the selection show who goes through some of the big decisions.
Some of the big decisions. But there's not like a written statement that's a paragraph or 2 for each team.
Maybe there should be.
I actually agree with that.
Transparency.
I think for maybe like the last 8 teams in and the last 8 teams out, if they came out with a written statement for each one of those teams, with a little more transparency,
they make people feel a little bit better about it.
Maybe people could understand the process a little bit better.
That'd be a cool idea.
All right, well, before we move on to the woman, we have to talk about Louisville. Chris said at the beginning of the season that all he wants is to beat Louisville.
I know, and you know what Virginia Tech has done to me? This was supposed to be my game as a fan. Well, they've gone and scheduled a bunch of interviews with football coaches right before the Louisville game, so I can't treat this game as a fan. Only chance to sit down and interview all the football coaches. Yeah. So they put it right before the game I've been looking forward to as a fan the entire season. It's killing me.
Right, so let's throw that out there real quick. There is a media event Tuesday night that starts at 5 o'clock and runs till 8:30. And it's in the Football Players Lounge, and they are going to allow media to. I don't know if it's going to be a podium thing or if they're going to allow.
I think it's going to be a
old school. Going to allow media to circulate and talk to all of the assistant coaches.
Yeah, but if you read the how it's worded, they're not all going to be in there at the same time.
They're going
to bring them in. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that'll maybe take a little bit out of your night as a fan for the Louisville game. 9 p.m. tip, so just 30 minutes after that event ends. Yeah. But again, you say Hokies probably should not lose this game. Louisville has now lost 9 of 10 and 11 of their last 13, blown out by Wake Forest on Saturday. But it's been 17 straight losses for Virginia Tech against Louisville. Right. Can they get it done?
Yeah. Louisville's not very good. What's their record? 11 and something.
They started better in the ACC and then have just completely imploded since.
Oh yeah, well,
12 and 16.
Right, they're 6 and 12 in the ACC.
6 and 12 in the ACC,
and since January 22nd, they've only won 1 game.
You look at the trajectory of both teams. I mean, they fired Chris Mack, and obviously they needed to go in a different direction there. But I think in basketball, when you fire a manager like that in the middle of the season and there's so much unknown, you're probably going to get worse. I mean, Maryland's gotten worse.
Yes.
So I don't really understand these mid-season firings. Not that Louisville would be an NCAA tournament team anyway, but I don't think it's helped the situation because it just creates more questions for the players. And I think Virginia Tech is playing like a team like I thought they would be at the beginning of the season, the top 3 or 4 team in the ACC. And Louisville's playing like a bottom 5 team in the ACC. And the game's in Blacksburg.
Yep.
Like, if you had to make a bet, who would you bet on?
Well, so yes, that's all correct. But I watched a good portion of that game against Wake Forest. And Louisville started off poorly. They were getting blown out. And then there was about a 10 or 12-minute stretch in the first half where they outscored Wake Forest, played really good basketball. And that's the Louisville I fear, is the Louisville I saw for that 10 to 12-minute stretch.
Well,
I'm not really concerned about the before and the after. That's the Louisville I fear.
Pitt played really well for a half against us.
Yeah.
Man,
You'd still love to play Pitt again, though, right? They stink.
Well, the quit factor is pretty high. What you don't want is for Louisville to get rolling and keep that confidence going the whole game. That's the thing.
Yeah, then Hokies, again, 9 p.m. tip inside Castle Coliseum Tuesday night, and then regular season finale, Clemson on Saturday. Seems like 2 must-wins for the Hokies heading into the ACC tournament.
It depends.
You probably have to make a deeper run in the ACC tournament if you lose either of those games. So, again, Louisville tomorrow, Clemson on Saturday, and all weekend long, the women's basketball tournament down in Greensboro. Virginia Tech came up just short yesterday of would have been the 3 seed had they won. Instead, now the 5 seed, they will play on Thursday against either Clemson or Syracuse. This team currently on the 6th line, according to ESPN, the NCAA tournament. Want to get up to that 4 to host games, but probably going to need a few wins if they want to.
They would have to pull off one of those wins against a Louisville or an NC State. Kind of missed a golden opportunity yesterday. It's unfortunate that 3-point shot didn't go in. Honestly, though, they didn't lose the game on that shot. They lost it in the first quarter. I think they were down by 11 at the end of the first quarter. Just got off to a bad start and weren't able to
10-1.
Yeah, weren't quite able to complete the comeback. The ACC's it's a tough league, it seems, in women's basketball. Certainly a tougher league in women's basketball than it is in men's basketball.
Yes,
this year. I think they were ranked. I don't know where they're ranked. Has the new rankings come out yet?
Not yet.
They'll come out at noon.
Okay, so I can't imagine they would really drop for losing a 2-point game to NC State. So let's say they're 23rd. I actually think they're better than their ranking, at least from a talent standpoint.
They have some head scratchers in there.
I know. That's the thing. It's like I know that at their peak, they're actually a much better basketball team than number 23 in the country. But when they're at their worst, like when they played Liberty, it's like,
they're not
good. What in the world? So it's you don't know what you're going to get from that standpoint. But on the whole, I feel like they'd be about as good a team as a 6 seed could be. I think.
Yeah,
I think it'd be a very strong 6 seed.
I think they're in a very similar situation to the men's team. If they just start hitting shots, it's incredible how much better they are. So there are 6 ranked teams in the ACC, 5 or 6.
Yeah,
and
6.
so I looked at all of Tech's games against ranked teams in the ACC. 4 of them were on the road, 3 of them were at home. On the road, they got blown out by UNC. They just didn't even show up. Played an ugly game against NC State and lost by 6. More or less got blown out against Notre Dame. It wound up being 13 points, but it wasn't that close. And then got blown out by Louisville. So on the road, they went 0-4, and the average score was 65-51. And in those games, they shot 34% from the field and 25% from 3. Now, then you go at home, they beat Georgia Tech and UNC, and they lost to NC State. So they went 2-5 against the other ranked teams in the ACC, and I'm not counting Duke because they beat Duke a couple times early. Yeah. Duke's not that good and shouldn't have been. I'm talking about that echelon that is currently ranked at the top of the league. So in the 5 losses, and Captain Obvious reporting for duty, this is the key. In the 5 losses, they shot 36% from the field, 25% from 3-point range, and so we were talking about this before we started recording. You can make the argument, well, those are the best teams in the league they're playing. Of course they don't shoot as well. You watched that game against NC State yesterday. That was a lot of open 3-pointers that Tech didn't make. 7 of 26. If they just make 3 more, 10 of 26, then they win that game. So this is the key for them is there's something – they're a very good basketball team, and Liz Kitley's pretty consistent.
Yeah.
no matter who she's playing against. What happens, in my opinion, and you guys that see every single game can comment on this, when they really start to play the better teams in the ACC, the shooting goes. I think there's something mental going on there because they're getting the same shots. They're just not making them.
And the Hokies will have to play some good teams in Greensboro this week. Again, first game, Syracuse or Clemson. Tech blew out both those teams when they faced them this year.
That shouldn't be an issue. And Syracuse very recently, right?
Yes. Tech beat Syracuse in the Carrier Dome 102-53 and beat Clemson earlier in February 73-42 in Castle. Oof. So 2 blowouts. Again, don't think you're worrying about Tech getting to the quarterfinals. Then a pretty evenly matched game against UNC, a team that beat Tech once, Tech beat once.
They split. And you were kind of worried because, that was another game where Tech got off to a bad start.
Yes.
21-9 at the end of the first quarter in the second game against UNC.
And UNC had actually blown out Tech in the first meeting.
Yes, 71-46.
So you're sitting there thinking, man, UNC must just be a bad matchup problem.
Yeah.
So
Tech came back and won that game.
The one team in the ACC that really worries me is Louisville.
Because they're on the other side of the bracket.
Yeah. They're Louisville's pressure. Louisville presses, full court press for 40 minutes.
It doesn't sound fun to deal with.
Well, and you can. It's tough for teams to get into a rhythm. And Tech had uncharacteristic turnovers. I think Louisville and Notre Dame, who are both on that other side of the bracket, are the 2 teams that give Tech the most trouble. Tech already beat North Carolina once, and Tech could have beaten NC State twice. And those are the 2 teams on this side of the bracket. I think it's a very favorable draw for the women.
Yeah, and I really think that Tech matches up well with NC State. And then I think to myself, really? Because I watched that game yesterday, and Tech played defense better in the second half, but they gave up 48 points in the paint.
Yes.
And a lot of it was NC State just cleared out. And it wasn't all Elisa Cunane. It wasn't her. It was really anybody on their team that they chose to isolate could get to the bucket and lay it in.
Probably didn't help that Kelly was in foul trouble either.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was pretty horrible, the way NC State got 48 points in the paint. But NC State shot 1 of 9 from three-point range, and that's not like them.
No.
So I say that I feel they match up well with NC State, and then when I look at those points in the paint, and I look at the way NC State didn't shoot the way they usually do from outside, and I don't know, I start to wonder.
Well, they match up better against them than Louisville, probably.
Well, yeah, that's the point. Like when they played Louisville, I'm just like,
it's just there's 2 teams in this league that are pretty obviously better than everybody. I would rather play NC State than the others, but that was a close game yesterday. But it was at Castle, and an ACC tournament game would not be in Castle.
No.
Yeah. This is what Kenny Brooks had to say after the game last night, because our Chris Hirons asked him just about defending the 3. And in that first game, NC State went off from behind the arc, and that's where Tech got behind. This game, Tech basically picked its poison. Tech limited to 3, gave up points in the paint. Kenny Brooks said, we weren't in our gaps. We weren't doubling because we were trying to stay home to limit the threes. It's a chess match. And then he said, it wasn't about the last play. It was about 20 plays throughout the game. You can't spot the number 3 ranked team in the country with a 10-1 lead and expect to dig yourself out, and that's what we had to do. So I honestly think a lot of it came down to Tech's defense, and just early in that game, NC State
Didn't they make 8 of their first 9 or 9 of their first 10?
Yeah, 11 of 18 in that first quarter.
Wow.
11 of 18. That's 61%. They led 23-12 at the end of the first quarter. And Tech wasn't hitting its shots and got a little bit better offensively, but there were a lot of kind of like what you mentioned, Will, where NC State, it wasn't a true isolation, but it was essentially 3 players on the wing. Cunane comes up and sets a screen for the ball handler who drives, and there's no help defense coming.
Yeah, Tech was not helping.
And she has a free lane to the basket. And something simple as that NC State scored on multiple times in the first quarter. And I think Tech did a better job from that point on. But again, you can't spot the best team in the ACC, a 10-1 lead out of the gate.
And Tech, again, you think as long as you don't lose to Syracuse or Clemson, you're going to be on the 6th line at worst. to get to hosting, do we think they have to make it to the championship? I would think beat Syracuse or Clemson, beat UNC, beat NC State. That probably would be enough to push you to the 4 line.
I think so, because I think you would get 2 quadrant 1 wins.
Yes.
As the NCAA determines it. NC State and North Carolina are both top 5 in the net. So that's 2 very, very quality wins. That means you all beat North Carolina twice and NC State once. And, then you'd play probably Notre Dame or Louisville. Yep. But yeah, I think, would it be enough? And again, like Chris has made the point earlier with the men's team, I think it all comes back to what other teams are doing, because there are some other really, really good teams. It's not like the men's team on the bubble where a lot of the other teams are okay.
Yeah. Right.
The teams you're battling for a top 4 seed with are really, really
You got to think they're
teams.
Probably going to win a couple of games in the conference tournament too.
Yeah. So, but
I don't think a lot changes at this point of the year. Once you get up into that, once you're clearly in the tournament. I mean, unless, like, if you're a 6 seed, you're probably going to stay a 6 seed whether you win your first game or lose.
If you beat NC State, that would be the only way I see Tech moving up. If you beat one of those top tier teams in the ACC. Yeah. But Tech clearly in the tournament. No reason to worry about Selection Sunday for the women's team.
Yeah, and then the key for them is just like it is for the men's team. The men's team has not shot well from 3-point range for a while now. Yeah. If that turns right around the time the ACC tournament starts, great. For the women, it's more a case of not shooting well from outside against the better teams in the conference. And again, these are open shots. We know they can make them. I mean, Amor and Kayla King were something like 2 of 11 or 2 of 12 from the outside. They can make those shots, and they were open shots. So if those start to fall, they're going to be a really hard team to beat.
Tech hoping to get hot at the right time, maybe make a run to a Sweet 16, which is what Kenny Brooks said their goal was at the beginning of the season. Run a little long here, but before we get out, David, anything good in the YouTube chat today?
Not a ton, but I do have this. So I went and I broke down every team all in the bubble that Joe Lenardi mentioned, and I broke down their quadrant 1 wins. The average is 1 quadrant 1 win and the average is 3 quadrant 1 wins and 5 quadrant 1 losses. The team that has the most quadrant 1 wins is Rutgers at 5-5. Wow. The 2 teams that have the least, ironically, Wake Forest and North Carolina, whose quadrant 1 wins both came against Virginia Tech. So
on the road in Castle.
Yeah.
So it's most of the teams have between 2, 3. There's 2 teams with 4, and that's BYU and Michigan that have 4 quadrant 1 wins. Rutgers has 5. Everybody else has 2 or 3.
Right.
So, but a lot of teams have played a lot more quadrant 1 games than Virginia Tech has.
Right. Like North Carolina's overall strength of schedule is ranked higher.
North Carolina's 1-7. Right. You've got a team in San Diego State that's played 10.
Right.
BYU 9.
The main thing with Carolina and Wake is they have more wins than Virginia Tech. So that's the difference. That's why Carolina and Wake are currently in the NCAA tournament. They've won 21 or 22 games.
They're both over 20.
And Tech is just at 18. Same number of quadrant 1 wins, but fewer overall wins for Virginia Tech.
And I think we've talked about it a lot on the podcast, but just the ACC, the fact that San Diego State has 10 quadrant 1 games and Virginia Tech has 6 is it's a little bit scary.
Yeah, well, and it's crazy because San Diego State, that's a West Coast Conference. Or that's Mountain West.
Yes.
BYU is 4-5 and has played 9 games. Games against St. Mary, playing St. Mary's is better than playing anybody pretty much but Duke. I mean, that's just the way it comes down to it. And, for a team like Oregon is the team right in front of Virginia Tech on the bubble. Oregon's 3-6, but 2 of those wins have come against UCLA. So there's a lot of teams that have a lot of quality wins that Virginia Tech just doesn't have.
That's one of the things
hasn't had the opportunity to have.
That's one of the things the selection committee, I think it's big for them because to make the NCAA tournament, all things else being equal, I think you need to show the committee that you can beat other NCAA tournament teams.
Going to be interesting to see how this all sorts itself out down the stretch. Always fun being on the bubble, at least. It gives us something to talk about.
It's almost like the tournament's already started.
Yeah.
Because you feel like every game is so critical.
Yeah.
And Tech Louisville on Tuesday, Clemson Saturday, and then we'll see how things sort out in the ACC tournament. But again, seems almost certain Tech will be the 7 seed when action opens up in Brooklyn next week. And then for the women's side, they are the 5 seed in Greensboro. First game, I believe, Thursday morning, 11 a.m.
Yeah.
So
on RSN, yay!
so Thursday morning, 11 a.m. And I want to say if they win that one, they're at
Thursday
11
morning.
a.m. on Friday against
Thanks,
UNC.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thursday at 11 a.m., Friday at 11 a.m. if they win at noon.
At noon.
So
Right.
Tech won't play a game before noon in the tournament. Kenny Brooks,
unless they get to the championship.
we informed the media informed Kenny Brooks about that after the game. He wasn't very happy having to play at 11 a.m. That's
if they make it all the way through, it's 11 a.m., noon, and noon.
Wow.
Now the first 2 games would be on RSN, and then the
ACC Network
semifinals
takes
will be on
over.
the ACC Network, and the championship is on ESPN. So let's not forget to give a shout out to the men's and women's indoor track team.
Yes. Yeah. Men's and women's indoor track team both winning the indoor ACC championships this weekend. We mentioned it that helps with the Commonwealth Clash getting 2 points there. But, yeah, pretty dominant, too. There were some records broken this weekend. Pole vault, I want to say, broke a record. I'm forgetting somebody else. But Dave Cinelli's group, great performance this weekend.
I think that's the first time indoor. I can't speak for outdoor, but I think that's the first
men
time
and
indoor
women
that they've won at the same
swept.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, baseball
swept
dominant
Fordham.
Weekend, softball dominant weekend.
Yes, yeah. Another great weekend for softball. Baseball, we were talking about it before we started. Jack Hurley for baseball this weekend. 10 of 11 with 3 home runs,
gosh.
3 doubles, and a triple, I want to say, was his final stat line. They intentionally walked him once, and he flipped his bat so high in the air. I think everybody had to clear out of the way near the dugout. So we said besides NC State, their freshman who has 9 home runs in 8 games, Jack Hurley is the hottest hitter in the country right now.
Wow. So it was a great weekend, except for the NC State Virginia Tech basketball game.
One shot away from being perfect.
So this weekend was great. Last weekend was horrible. And the weekend before that was great.
Almost perfect as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hopefully not a trend where it's going back and forth. We won't even talk about that.
And I was going to say wrestling will take place this upcoming weekend.
Yes,
in
ACC
Charlottesville.
championships this weekend in Charlottesville. So a lot coming up this week. Tuesday, baseball back in action, basketball. Then women's tournament starts on Thursday. Men play again on Saturday. Wrestling championships this weekend. A lot to look forward to. I'm sure softball back in action somewhere this weekend.
Probably, yeah.
So a lot to look forward to for Hokies fans. Definitely no shortage of games to tune into this week. Before we get out of here, anybody got anything else? Bubble watch, women's tournament. I think we covered everything.
I think I got everything in there.
Yeah. I'm just about to lose my voice, so I can't talk anymore.
All right. Well, that's going to do it here on episode 227 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Thanks everybody on set. Will Stewart, founder and general manager of Tech Sideline across the way, at Will Stewart TSL on Twitter. Be sure to give him a follow. Same with Chris Coleman, at Chris Coleman TSL, lead analyst and columnist for Tech Sideline. David Cunningham, great job in the 4th chair today. Our managing editor probably has to get back to editing more articles with all of the sports going on right now. Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes always does a great job. I'm your host, Jake Lyman, signing off. Enjoy the games this week, Hokies fans. We'll see you next time.